So next in this room, we'll be discussing closing the loop on packaging. In particular, food packaging. But if you want to switch, you can go to the Kōwhai room for a discussion on lobbying for change, or you can shift to Kakariki for a session on sharing and lending. So we'll start the session here at 2:40 once I find all the participants and make them co-hosts. Okay, so kia ora koutou. Welcome to the final breakout session here in Whiro. We are discussing all things to do with packaging, in particular with closing the loop on food packaging from composting to reuse. This afternoon, we'll understand how 3 different people minimize or even eliminate food packaging in a business and in household settings. This is a show and tell session. I'll ask each speaker a question and then they'll show and tell us what they use. And then after they've had the opportunity to ask each other a few questions, we'll throw it open to the room and take your questions. So pop them in the chat as we go. The 3 panelists this afternoon are Lee McDermid from Prima Roastery. Kia ora, Lee. Helena Ruffell, Helena Ruffell, a PhD student at the University of Canterbury doing research on the impact of microplastics on productive soils. Kia ora.
Kia ora, everyone.
And I haven't managed to work out whether Sharon's actually made it. And Sharon has made it. Sharon had a quick, speedy transition from the previous session in Kakariki to this one. So Dr. Sharon McIver is the founder of Our Daily Waste, a social enterprise dedicated to waste prevention. My first question goes to Lee. How does a local coffee roastery close the loop on packaging?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of major waste sources from our roastery. So yeah, just a little bit about us first is we're Prima Roastery. We roast coffee and we supply it to cafes and businesses and retail people, and we have a little cafe ourselves. But yeah, so the 2 key sources of waste are packaging for our beans, and then the sort of poster product for single-use waste in New Zealand, which is the coffee cup, the single-use coffee cup, which is pretty common in cafe setting everywhere in New Zealand, really. But so part of how we're trying to close the loop is taking that waste hierarchy approach. So that's reduce and reuse somewhere up there at the top. And so for our own cafe, we just removed single-use takeaway cups. And that was about 5 years ago. So we've had quite a bit of time to see what the sort of results of that have been, and it's been really positive. And then on the other side is packaging for beans, and for that we reduced the packaging by using reusable tins for all our wholesale accounts that we can deliver to anyhow. But then further down that sort of hierarchy is the compostability aspect. So our packaging's we use compostable packaging, which we introduced 10 years ago when it was sort of first became available. It's made by a company called Convex in Hamilton. And so yeah, we've been using that, but it's definitely not it doesn't have a proper end of life solution, or it hasn't in New Zealand for most of that time. So for a few years we were collecting it all ourselves, and we've been accepting returns of that packaging to our roastery, but we went a little bit further and started taking it back from cafes along with food waste and compostable cups from EcoWare, and composting it ourselves, or myself really. Yeah, that went reasonably well for a while, but it's quite a lot of work to compost, and that's, I suppose, where that waste hierarchy comes from. It's much easier just not to create the waste in the first place, And I know that after having lifted, half a dozen bins a week into the back of my truck and driving them out and composting them on the farm. So that's now ended. And our new solution, which has been quite cool, is partnering with Canterbury Landscape Supplies and Total Waste Solutions to provide a collection service where they'll come past the cafes that we supply. Customers can bring their used compostable packaging from any source, whether it's our bags or cups or from another cafe down the road or whatever. It's sort of public, and they can drop them off. Total Waste Solutions will pick it up and take it up to Canterbury Landscape Supplies, and they've got a forced aeration windrow system out there that they've got going, and they're taking PLA-based packaging, which has kind of closed the loop for us a little bit, which is really, really cool. So that's where we're at.
Awesome. Lovely. Thank you, Lee. Helena, you must be really concerned about microplastics, studying it, and I wonder, what are your top tips for avoiding single-use plastics, especially packaging, when shopping at the supermarket?
Cool, thank you, Jessica. So the most important thing is to bring your reusable bag. This is a non-negotiable. So once you've got your bag and you've arrived at the supermarket, the first place you'll enter is the produce section. So you do not need a plastic produce bag to put your apples and kiwi fruit in. You can just put it straight in your basket or straight into your trolley. You do not need it. If you are buying something like green beans or Brussels sprouts or yams and you want something to put it in, I would suggest getting some of these produce bags. You can buy them from most supermarkets, or you can make your own out of like old net curtains, which are really handy. Not at the moment with COVID, but usually you can go to the deli section and take your own container. So I know most Countdowns and New Worlds and Pack and Saves will accept your own container. And how this works is the attendant will put it on the scales first and tear it, so that way you're not paying for the weight of your container. And you can get your salads and deli meats and cheeses in here and whatnot, which is super cool. Also in the bakery section, you might have seen that there are a lot of loose buns and scrolls and muffins and whatnot. So instead of getting a paper bag, you can bring your own. So you can bring your own like little reusable bag, or if you don't have one, you can just bring a pillowcase. So if you wanted to buy like like those 14 bun packets that they have, or even like a pull-apart bread, you can just bring a pillowcase. When we move on to the pick and mix aisle, if you're like me and you just love the New World Scroggin, you can bring your own Ziploc bag. So this is one that I just have from home, and I reuse it and I wash it in keeping it nice. So that way you don't end up getting a new Ziploc bag each time. These are totally fine to reuse, and they actually do last quite a long time. And you might have noticed in some supermarkets now they have refill stations. So this is where you can refill liquids. So you might have seen Eco Store. You can take your dishwashing liquids and hand soap and shampoo bottles and get a refill. So what you need to do is bring your old bottle. It's really important that you pay attention to the volume, because it's either sold as 500 ml portions or 1 litre. So you could bring any bottle which is either 500 ml or 1 litre into the shop, have it empty, and then you just fill it up. And they will usually have stickers, so you can put it on the back, and then you would write the product code here on the back of your bottle, and then you just type it into the self-checkout, or the checkout operator will do that for you, just the same as pick and mix. So yeah, and also keep an eye out for things like bamboo toothbrushes and things like shampoo bars and bottles of soap. Sorry, not bottles of soap, bars of soap, which are unpackaged as well. So some supermarkets will have quite a lot of options for you to go plastic free and reduce your packaging.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Helena. And Sharon, where do you shop and what do you use?
Kia ora koutou. So I've been shopping at Bin Inn for 20 years now, and I've used my containers that whole 20 years until last week when I had to do a COVID shop and I had to use plastic bags. I did complain to them when they gave me a bag about the plastic lining, but I actually do prefer using plastic containers at Bin Inn, and that's partly because I've got arthritis in my hands. So for me, holding a container like this, being able to take the lid off, use the scoop straight into it, and then press the lid back on is a lot easier than if I was to use a jar. And I did that, which you really don't want to do on the floor of a bulk food thing in case it breaks. So I take my plastic containers when I get home, and then I put them in the jars to store them in my cupboards. One thing I don't mind using a jar for is almond butter. So they've got really good for peanut butter and almond butter. You can just put your jar under the machine and it just makes the butter straight out of the almonds. So that's a really nice way to use glass there. I also quite like to use, for olive oil bottles, etc., I use a glass jar. This one's nice and square, so it's easy for me to hold. So that's just a few hints if you've got some nervousness about bulk filling, because it can be messy. One thing I've just added to my Bin Inn bag this week, and I cannot believe in 20 years I never thought this, and it took Leslie Ottey to tell me, is a tea towel. They have tea towels there, but trust me, they are manky. And when you get cocoa or olive oil or you get turmeric on them, you want your own tea towel. I can't believe I haven't been doing this. But anyway, this is what this session's all about. And also with COVID, you're going to be able to want to wipe your hands on something that nobody else is. So when I go into Bin Inn, I take my containers up to the counter. They tear them for me. They weigh it first. I think this has got the weight here. They tear it. I go and fill everything up, come back. They take the weight off. And then because it's Bin Inn, they do a subtotal and they give me 5% discount because I've used my own containers. So you start saving, first of all, you're saving because it's bulk, and then they add extra discounts. And then they also stamp your card every time you use $20 and give you $5 off after 15 stamps or something. So that's how I go about the Bin Inn shopping. Of course, this is applicable to virtually anywhere that has bulk food. Stores. When I started shopping at Bin Inn 20 years ago, I was a really poor student, and I estimated I knocked 30% around about off the cost of my groceries. So I've kept that up, and I can't even imagine how much landfill I've saved from doing that. So that's me. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Sharon. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I see there's been a great discussion going on in the chat, and I think most of the questions there have been answered. But Tony asks, and I wonder if this is open to all the panel, what can we do about over-packaging with other items? Tony says clam packaging is a nightmare, wasteful, but also quite dangerous. Anybody got any suggestions?
I think send them back. I keep meaning to do it myself, but you can always take photos. If you don't want to send the packaging back, you can always take photos and post it onto their Facebook pages and question why they're using so much package. This is one of the beautiful things about social media. So yeah, I'd say send them back.
Cool. Helena or Lee?
No, I agree. Yeah. They need to be made aware of it, that it's a problem to begin with. Otherwise, they're just going to keep packaging their products in that material. Yeah.
I don't have a particularly useful solution, but I do think that hopefully some of this compostability sort of side of the solution might come into play with some of those products that you can't avoid packaging with. So obviously, there's plenty of examples of over packaging of products, but sometimes, especially in the food industry, you need something just for safety reasons. And I always think I'm still waiting for them to do meat packaging and use a compostable material for that. I'm sure it's possible. You kind of have to have it if you're going to have meat on a shelf in public. It's it just has to be packaged well properly. It has to be high barrier, and compostable packaging can do that. So perhaps it'll take sort of one small segment of that packaging market and deal with it a little bit better eventually.
Cool. Thank you all. Sharon, Lee, if you've got socials or other links to share in the chat, please do that now, because we are going to transition shortly over back to the main room. But I'd like to thank all three of our panelists, and indeed, if you've been here for most of the session, all five of the people who have led and been in these sessions in the whero room this afternoon. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise, your knowledge and your passion to this discussion. We know it is just, Helena, thanks for that. We know that this is a huge discussion and we are barely scraping the surface for some of this afternoon, but it's all really inspiring, and you can keep up with our panelists and contributors on their socials or at their websites.